Hey everyone, I'm Adam Hart, a curator for MediaBurn, and I'm thrilled to be here to introduce a truly unique and wonderful program with artist Nina Sobell and art historian Christina Albu. We've been doing our virtual talks with video activists since 2020, and we're filling up our slate for the upcoming year. We spent the last few years collecting and digitizing amazing work from video history's most passionate, unique, and fiercely independent voices, and also making new friends. And we're excited to share that work with you. We'll be holding monthly talks for the foreseeable future with an event with the great Joan Logue next month, moderated by the equally great Helena Shashkovich. Um, I'd imagine that you're already signed up for our newsletter if you're here tonight. But if you'd like to hear more about upcoming events and also get occasional notes from me and Sarah about what MediaBurn is up to and the great stuff in our collection, I'll put the link in the chat for you to sign up. So for anyone who is joining us for the first time, MediaBurn is an independent nonprofit dedicated to saving and sharing the history of independent and community-based video. We have thousands of videos that anyone can watch for free on mediaburn.org, a website that will become much, much nicer looking and easier to use in a few short months. Thank the Lord. Those videos in our collection range from works made by world-renowned video makers like Nina or several of the people in the audience tonight, to footage shot by high school students chronicling their own communities in Chicago. There's a little bit of everything on MediaBurn. Documentaries and journalism, animation and video synthesizers, the avant-garde, installations, comedy skits, interviews, amateur and professional. We've been doing this for a while, and we're still extremely excited about preserving this work and helping it to find the audience it deserves. So for tonight's event, we'll be screening a series of videos chronicling the brainwave drawing installations of artist Nina Sobell. It's a combination of short documentaries that have been made about and with Nina, as well as some footage and commentary from Nina over the years that's really never been seen before. I'll let the videos give you the explanation about what exactly brainwave drawing is, but I'll just say that it's an art practice that Nina's been engaged in various forms for over 50 years, and that it is both a profoundly moving idea and that it creates amazingly cool imagery. Again, this is a truly unique viewing experience.
Nina Sobell has been intrigued by the idea of being able to capture the emittance of electrical impulses by the brain and transposing them into a graphic image since 1973. She began to collaborate with systems engineer Michael Trivich. On the monitor, two people were able to see their physical as well as mental image. They were able to create one composite brainwave drawing in real time. Sobell was determined to devise a non-competitive, creative environment geared to home TV viewers who could create an active rather than passive TV viewing experience and enhance their ability to communicate. Dr. Barry Sturman of the Sepulveda Veterans Administration Hospital in California offered access to equipment. As the director of the neuropsychology lab, he was most interested in the psychosociological aspects of the piece. Electrodes were attached to the occipital region of the brain, the visual cortex of two participants. They sat comfortably in front of a monitor which displayed their faces and the superimposed composite brainwave information. The real-time Lisa-Joux pattern changed in accordance with the brainwave activity. When both people put out the same brainwave, it formed an irregular circular configuration. Nonverbal communication between the participants was the objective. When one person was distracted, it appeared as distortion horizontally or vertically, depending upon the axis, which displayed his or her brainwave pattern. The results were averaged through a PDP-10 computer and proved that two people could influence each other's mind states nonverbally. The EEG video telemetry environment was installed at the Contemporary Arts Museum in Houston, Texas. It was open to public participation. Electrodes were attached to participants in the same manner as in the Sepulveda installation, and an electroencephalogram was given to them. The public could view closed-circuit monitors of the people in the living room environment, and the graph being made, a video projector also played back what others had previously created. Soon after getting a job at the computer store, Sobell began to collaborate with biocybernetics engineer Chris Matthews in using computer graphics to enhance brainwave drawing. With the support of Dick Heiser, experiments were made using his equipment and an EEG device from the Biofeedback Research Institute. During the following year, Matthews and Sobell developed computer graphics programs for the piece. By 1981, after experimenting with different patterns, their efforts were recorded in Matthews' laboratory. John Gord built a special effects generator, and other equipment was donated. It was discovered that when one participant made a transition from one brainwave state to another, it often influenced a similar transition in the other person, non-verbally. During the past phases, more emphasis was placed on the graphics. Now, attention was focused to achieve accuracy with the analog to digital device, the link between sophisticated EEG equipment and the Apple computer. After extensive testing, an environment was opened to the public at the Long Beach Museum of Art in the Artist and the Computer show. A computer program was created by Kong Lu, which resembled an electroencephalogram. Colors were keyed to each different mind state. The computer displayed an image showing previous brainwave activity, as well as the immediate responses. This allowed the participants to view their deeper previous states, as well as the current patterns which were altered by the activity of looking at the screen.
Information from the brain and hopefully detect form, color, that sort of thing. And another computer that would generate, say, three-dimensional images, depending on what happens in the brain.
I see.
So for that system, we'll need something like 16 channels of information per person to cover that whole visual cortex.
And you
Analyze the information from the brain and hopefully detect form, color, that sort of thing. And another computer that would generate, say, three-dimensional images, depending on what happens in the brain.
I see.
So for that system, we'll need something like 16 channels of information per person to cover that whole visual cortex.
And you would then colorize that, each individual channel?
Something like that. There are a number of techniques for mapping brain information onto an artistic medium. One would be frequency into color, frequency into distance or size of an image, differential or small differences in brain activity mapping onto, say, the size or shape of some pre-programmed form, like a star shape or some adjusting the parameters on it.
The show featured artists who work intimately with technology. Sobell installed the interactive brainwave drawing installation. Sobell's collaborator, Masahiro Kahata, designed the brainwave sensors and computer program called IBVA, or Interactive Brainwave Visual Analyzer. Kahata's design enabled subjects to strap electrodes to their foreheads. Their brainwave activity was fed through a Macintosh computer and displayed as a colored chart moving across the TV screen in real time. Sobell constructed a living room environment in which a couch sat opposite the TV set. A video camera stationed above the set was trained on the subjects' faces. Thus, an interactive loop was formed, whereby subjects saw their own faces on the TV screen, superimposed by the graphic representation of their brainwave activity. In a box at the top of the screen appeared graphics designed by Sobell. When subjects fell into the same brainwave state, a pair of figures appeared in the box. As they remained in the same brainwave state, the figures were gradually drawn together. Each brainwave was assigned a specific color. We're drawn together by our brains. Watch us together. Walk together. Look at us. We're on TV. There we are. We're on TV. We surrender to technology because we need its help. It helps us to feel connected. We command the equipment, and we are not at its mercy.
Figures in the center. As these two.
We have no color. We have no religion. We are information spots on the database. This furniture helps us to be together. We're interactive. We communicate. We're drawn together by electricity and magnetism. This hyper-high-tech theater is a rehearsal for our future. We can attain mental intimacy without the equipment. The interactive brainwave drawing installation is an invitation. It provides the stage and the props which revalidate the activity of communication without words.
What I'll be mainly talking about is the EEG video telemetry environment, which is installed here at the Contemporary Arts Museum, Houston, Texas. Before I go into it very much, I'd like to talk a little bit about the environments that I've been involved with before, which mirror the one I'll be talking about here to quite an extent, in the fact that they have always involved the participation of people within the environment to their own satisfaction, with their own result, not a preconceived, controlled environment, but a self-controlled, non-programmed environment in which the extent and the potentials of their experience are relative only to themselves. In this environment, it is the communication or the participation of two parties together, communicating on a verbal or nonverbal basis. The environments that I've done before also involved the interplay and interface of people within the environment, the object, with themselves, with other people, not giving any directions as to what to do, how to react, what to give or what not to give. The joy that people express in their participation, the experiences which they evoke from themselves, is the most rewarding. What really goes on between the people, as far as their own involvement, is which is what they do, what they choose to do in accordance with the environment that they are in, is the most important thing. Okay, realizing that, now I can talk a little bit more about this environment, which sometimes reflects a feedback environment which should attain a certain end. It is not. It is the presentation of the physical image with the marriage of the mental image on a real-time basis, meaning that people sit together, are able to look at their image, immediate response to their image on a closed-circuit monitor or on a real-time level, and see the combined efforts of both of their brainwave activity linked together as one circular configuration. So in effect, the visual communication, or the visual image, which they are transferring, is the output of both of their brainwaves, looped together and superimposed on their faces at the same time. Whatever they are thinking or whatever they are feeling is registered in such a way that they receive a visual image, a visual response which they can relate to, either rewinding the tape they are making together or looking at it with their eyes open or talking, however they wish to respond. In doing so, no matter what the circular configuration makes itself as, it is up to them to interpret, or if they want to interpret, what they felt between them. What also brings joy is the ideas or the energy which is bringing them the ideas, which is themselves at the time, of new aspects to the environment which in fact are not existent, but which makes them realize what they already know to be, to exist within themselves, become existent. It is an image which is presented to them which they can believe in, the video, television environment, television screen in which they see themselves on and their brainwave activity at the same time. Leaving this much room for one's own interpretation is a very important factor in making one realize the innate potential of nonverbal communication, the innate power that we all have, but rarely realize that we can initiate or use or employ or find joy in using or giving. This is the thing which incites my interest, which makes me want to go on doing more, which makes me always think of greater potentials of this environment. And I guess at this point, I'd really like to talk about it. So we can go on a little mini tour of what is installed here now. What I'm now doing is affixing the electrodes which are registering the person's brainwave activity in the occipital region of the brain. The occipital region is able to register eye movement as well as give excellent signals of brainwave activity, getting the clearest signal from the best source. That's what we have to do. This is taking the differential between two electrodes, attaching a ground to gain the best signal. The electrode box that you see here is, you put the inputs of both sets of electrodes into the box. It is an extension cord, in other words, to the EEG machine in the other environment outside. In order to do this, to apply the electrodes, we use electrode jelly and electrode cream. The inputs on the box correspond with the part of the brain that we're taking the signal from. Although these are all equal inputs, this is a key guide to keep that constant. Now that the electrodes are firmly attached, we will be able to get a signal to register on the EEG machine. and then out of the EEG machine into the oscilloscope, so that when I attach electrodes to the other person's scalp in the same area, we will have the combined output of two people's brainwaves being fed simultaneously into the oscilloscope, into the EEG machine first, of course, then out of the EEG machine into the oscilloscope, one person on the horizontal axis, one person on the vertical axis.
Here we are at the computer store in Santa Monica, California. What we will be showing you here today is how Anita and Michael will be making one continuous synchronous brainwave drawing together. In order to utilize the brainwaves for a medium to make a drawing displayed on the TV in front of them, we must first amplify the brainwaves. Electrodes are attached in the occipital region of the brain, the visual cortex. We are then seeing on the screen in front of them the combined amplification of their brainwaves. When the image, and then on the top is the conrack, which is displaying the input on the x-axis and of Anita and the y-axis of Michael, and the combined output is a diamond kind of shape form. When this form extends outward on the screen, it's an indication that they are both putting out alpha or theta together. When the image you see now becomes smaller and more centered on the screen, that is more their waking, talking state, beta. One person, if you see a strong distortion, like an X angling out like this, that is Michael, and in the other direction is Anita. Because of the combination of both of their brainwaves simultaneously into the oscilloscope, it is enabling us to see this pattern emanating between them. Now, the image here is an image which has been processed through the Apple computer. It is a program which is changing with the changes of the output of their brainwaves. The colors now do not correlate to the specific brainwave outputs, but we will be color keying them so they will be able to recognize those changes via color code.
What we have here is an electroencephalograph which picks signals up from the visual cortex of the brain on two channels for the two people working together. It goes to this box right here, which takes the information from the brain and digitizes it, producing a signal that the computer can understand. The information from the EEG goes up to the conrack directly, which shows a direct output from the brain. The information also goes to the computer, which analyzes the brainwave signals for frequency and intensity, and creates a visual image on the screen. Now, the object eventually will be to synthesize some artistic pattern, which will be a mutual creation hopefully directly linked to some intention on the part of the people participating in terms of creating actual form, color, movement, shape.
What we are going to be working on now, as well as making the actual image the participants are making more sophisticated, we are also working on the idea of having one person in LA, let's say Anita is in LA here at the computer store working with this Apple. In New York, Michael will be using another Apple and an identical feedback system that is the identical electrode amplification system between LA and New York, which the public will see via video phone. They will. And as well, we will be making a slow scan, hard copy, combined book of the actual images made between LA and New York. This communication and drawing will be broadcast via satellite. We hope to have this by the first of the year, 1980. So at that time, we will make another tape that you will be seeing, hopefully via satellite. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nina. All right. Nina Sobell is a sculptor, multimedia and performance artist who pioneered the use of EEG technology, closed-circuit television, and internet communication. Her remarkable body of work includes live performance and television, museum installations, sculpture, and interactive video matrices that invite public participation. Her work has been exhibited or screened all over the world, including the Getty Museum, Institute of Contemporary Art London, the De Saisset Museum, Banff Center for the Arts, Manchester Gallery, Cam Houston, the Dia Foundation, the Hammer Museum, the Whitney Museum, and on and on and on and on. We are thrilled to have her here tonight. She will be in conversation with Christina Albu, Associate Professor of Art History at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. Her research addresses how contemporary art enables us to question what and how we perceive. It focuses on artists' use of new media such as video and biofeedback technology to enhance attention and highlight the fluidity of selfhood and interpersonal exchanges. She's the author of Mirror Affect, Seeing Self, Observing Others in Contemporary Art, and the co-editor of a volume of essays titled Perception and Agency in Shared Spaces of Contemporary Art. So with that, Christina, would you like to kick us off?
Thanks a lot, Adam, and thanks, Nina, for inviting me to be in conversation with you. I'd just like to start by saying what an amazing compilation of footage of brainwave drawings this is. I wish I had had a chance to watch it while I was first looking into Nina's work, and I was trying to make sense of all these different iterations of brainwave drawings as it developed from the initial stages when she proposed it and tested it out in this lab at the Sepulveda Veterans Hospital. And then it's moved to Contemporary Art Museum in Houston. The focus then on computer graphics and brainwave analysis. And in the 1990s, there's a growing complexity to the work throughout this whole period of time. And I've been really passionate about Nina's works because she's a pioneer of media art, of interactive art, but also someone who looks across multiple media at social systems and the connections between social systems and evolving technology. And one of the highlights for me of this documentation is the moment when Nina mentions that these interactions are kind of rehearsal for the future. It's kind of the testing ground for how we might become better aware of these non-verbal threads of communication that exist between us all the time and how technology makes this possible. So, Nina, I'd like to just start the conversation off with some broad questions, and then maybe the audience can join in. And one of the things that I noticed is that this video footage kind of ends, on this note concerning the future potential of the work and how you are envisioning this project where you would create the opportunity for two people that are at a very far distance from each other, one in New York and one in LA, to be in attunement through their brainwaves. And you're hoping to make this possible through satellite communication. So I'm interested to see how you pursued that idea. If it came to fruition in 1980, as you announced at the end of that footage. And also, I'm interested how it relates to the broader scope of the telematic art category, which has been greatly theorized in the meantime, but it was an idea in its infancy in 1979 when you're talking about this. And I think we are better familiar now, when we think about landmarks of such works such as Kit Galloway and Cheryl Rabinowitz, Holy in Space, which involve this communication between New York and LA in 1980. We are better familiar with what happened in the 1990s with these telematic technologies and the mediation that became possible also through the use of the internet. So maybe you could guide us through the development of your ideas when it came to this remote connection, and maybe tell us a little bit whether it's equally intense. I know you usually think it is, as this kind of face-to-face proximate connectivity that happened in the initial stages of brainwave drawings.
Well, after the computer store, I wanted to, as I say, do this satellite communication, but I wanted to first concentrate on creating new digital brainwave graphics. First with the creating the converging lightning bolts, and then with the physical and mental superimposition on the earlier work, as in it's in the earlier work. So I had the first the lightning bolts, and then the more geometric superimposition on the people's faces at the same time. And by doing that, I actually became distracted, and during this time I created an in and out the window using technology to cradle yet formalize the communication between women artists, a parallel set of closed circuit video monitors faced each of the two artists inside and outside the storefront window, and it was curated by Sheila Pinkel for Suzanne Lacey and Leslie Lapwitz's Making It Safe project. And after working at the computer store, I started working at UCLA in 1981 and introduced graduate students to the use of computers to make art, sending them all over the campus to take photographs of how different departments were incorporating computer graphics. I also guided them in making icons to be projected on the Goodyear's Blimps digital display board in emergencies, with whom I had been in contact with. And this was the nascent media arts department of UCLA. And I've always believed in the strength and intimacy of nonverbal communication, even at a distance, with animals too. This concept stayed with me, and as soon as it was possible in early 1995, I engaged with viewers in a one-time virtual physical participatory performance, making a clay sculpture where virtual participants directed me in adding clay to an armature. This was soon followed by taking the camera to the street and involving the human as a chauffeur, interacting with the virtual and passerby participants at the Code Show in New York, and gaining access to see the show remotely was prompted by the thought of those unable to be physically there. So it was like one of the very first mobile webcams. And that was my intention. I said, well, how can I have people who can't be there, be physically there, participate together with passersby who don't feel invited to go into a gallery, and setting up a matrix outside that window for them to control the camera, and between the web participants, the chauffeur, and the passersby, they all were communicating together.
And that
One web
promise of connection between virtual and physical space was part of Virtualis as well, one of the very first telerobotic artworks. So that was also important. And I'd also like to hear
yes,
more about your use of the
yeah.
internet throughout the 1990s and how it became coupled with this idea of brainwave attunement. So maybe you can tell us more about your project at Banff Center for the Arts.
Okay, one web seance in particular, Meditations, Memory, Dream, and Fantasy, where two participants, one in New York and the other in Banff, each were connected to EEGs, intimately communicating through text and eye contact, while they, the web audience and the physical audience, all contributed to the same meditation prompt together. So by sharing the same mental thought processes simultaneously, the seance provided a space for remote, intimate, nonverbal communication to occur. They were all involved in the same mental process.
I find that to be
Yeah.
really fascinating, also in terms of the meditative aspects of that communication, right? And its ability to open up this intimate sphere, right? That we still associate at that point in time with the internet. I think we are much more cautious now about the publicness of it. And one aspect that I think, is really strong throughout your practice, in addition to this kind of conceptual pillar that has to do with nonverbal communication, is the way in which you merge multiple media together. And I know in those web seances you did in Banff, you also used drawing. There was someone who was sketching as this brainwave communication was going on between Banff and New York. So there were responses that were creative and meditative going on simultaneously. And you've been trained as a sculptor, right? You started as a sculptor and then you moved into interactive sculpture and eventually embraced performance and video, but you never let go of sculpture. So my question would be, how do you see this media relating to each other? How does the sculptural process of modeling clay, which is actually incorporated in some of your video work as well, like left brain and right brain, how does it compare to the modeling of the electromagnetic waves and the use of video in your work?
Well, my video performances, whether they be personally performative or participatory, are all immediate in nature, and that is why video is employed as a time-based medium. The visceral experience of working with clay, of forming something with one's hands, of having something form, touching the clay, and having it exist, is sometimes overwhelmingly desired, like making a drawing or a painting. Sometimes my fingers just have to feel the clay, and the energy is so strong, nothing else will do, no matter how long it takes. And I often keep coming back to the same sculpture over and over time, whereas video is encapsulated in one tape. One is physical and the other is ethereal, but both hold a similar energy.
I think there's something to be said about this pervasive, right, power of transmission of energy, whether through information fields or whether through this bodily energy that we transmit to each other.
Christina, could you talk maybe a little bit about your research, like the sort of influence and, um, you know, legacy of the kind of work that Nina was doing in the 70s and 80s, how we see it today, maybe?
Yeah. I think it's such an important moment, in the 1970s. And at the point at which Nina is starting using this visual feedback in relation to brainwaves, most of the experiments in terms of the art world had been done with music, with sound, because of the immediacy of it and its facility to activate the alpha brainwaves that have to do with meditative states of mind. So Nina is one of the very first artists to experiment a lot more with the visual aspects of feedback to neural attunement between the brainwave oscillations of two participants. And also it's pivotal work in terms of science as well, because these were the beginnings of scientific inquiries into neural entrainment. And researchers were primarily looking at the way we become attuned to the rhythm of light of a certain frequency or of sounds of a certain frequencies in relation to the oscillations of our brainwave frequencies. But Nina is looking at the social system. She's no longer looking at just the individual and this kind of stimulus response system, but she's looking at the complexity of the world, right? For her, it's really important to think of the interpersonal dimension, the collective dimension. She currently has a work called Gamma Time that actually involves 4 participants, and the environment as a whole, right? Because she's thinking about this in a very systematic manner. So I think she's done crucial work, and the people she collaborated with, for example, in the footage, she mentions an engineer called Masahiro Kahata, and he actually worked with Mariko Mori, the Japanese artist who created Wave UFO in 2003, and that's an installation artwork that's also participatory and involves this kind of brainwave attunement between 3 participants. So she really broke ground, in the 1970s with this installation. And it's just amazing to watch this footage and see how the work developed from one stage to another and how it turned into something different also when it came to the age of the internet and Nina's interest in this kind of telematic performances that have to do with web seances.
We're still waiting. It looks like she's been trying to get back on, but maybe I can keep picking your brain, Christina. I have a very dumb and naive question that I think you're like much more qualified than I am to understand, which is
I'll do my best to address it. I'm not sure.
there's a lot of discussion in these videos about brainwaves, and I'm not sure exactly what that is. Like we have this idea of brainwaves being thought, or maybe it's just electrical impulses, but what is actually being measured in terms of like the actual like EEG machine that's being translated into visuals?
Oh, I mean, it's electricity. Our brain works on it. It's electromagnetism, the electromagnetism of the brain. So yeah, what they are doing is actually using a EEG machine to measure different thresholds, to measure transformations in brainwave frequencies. So EEG technology was developed, like kind of in the 1920s. It was developed by Berger, and people were initially very skeptical of it. And the first rhythm that was studied extensively was the alpha brainwave rhythm, which has to do with this meditative state of mind in which you are still in a state of awareness, but you're not focusing on a task, right? There's a beta rhythm that's higher. in frequency than the alpha rhythm. And that's the rhythm that exists within our brains when we are focusing on a task, when we are focusing on problem solving, for instance. There are also lower frequency rhythms like delta and like theta that have to do with, states of even deeper relaxation and, with delta even falling into unconscious states and deep sleep, right? And then there's gamma rhythm that Nina is interested in studying now, which has to do with highly creative states in which our brainwave frequencies are really high. So we don't have, the same brainwave frequency throughout the whole brain. Actually, different parts of our brain have different brain frequencies. It's really complex. So it depends on where you are measuring. It depends on, where the electrodes are placed. You could see that she was just placing them, the visual cortex area of our brain and the occipital area. But now technology has evolved a lot, and usually, there are more electrodes that are being used. There's portable EEG technology. There are so many advances that facilitate the use of this technology.
Okay, great. I'm going to explain a bit about gamma waves.
Yeah, tell us
And
about gamma time.
gamma time. Gamma time is what I'm working on now. And gamma time, I believe both works have healing potential. And one is inferred by its matrix, and the other is more literal. Gamma time is almost more literal in that gamma waves are associated with cognitive functioning, memory, and learning, and oscillate typically between 30 and 100 hertz. At 40 hertz, gamma waves literally stimulate naturally occurring physical attributes that are meant to cleanse the brain of plaque and registers them as neurofeedback signals in sound and motion, and also signals the participant when they are emitting 40 hertz gamma waves. The collaborative nonverbal communication that occurs deeply holds the participants' experiences together.
It's lovely, Nina. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? And, I know it's still in progress. But I don't know if you can reveal more. I know there's a patent that's patent application pending.
Well, it's a lot of fun. And when
Right.
people when they participate, they seem to really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And get a lot from it and add to it and have it grow and expand. And every time somebody comes to try it, new things evolve. I'm working with a wonderful engineer and artist, Ed Bear, and an assistant, Lucinda Jacobson, and we make a wonderful team together. It's really refreshing, and we're always coming up with new things, new sound. Now we have a new approach to the sound and sound feedback, and we can play a duet, and each person hears the feedback from each brainwave that's being put out, and then has information for when they put out 40 hertz gamma. And I'm already saying too much.
If I could chime in, we have a few questions that are just, Nina, a few questions about your work with the scientists, both the neurologists, but then also the engineers and computer types, all that. If you could just talk about like how you get scientists interested in your projects and also what your working relationship has been like with them.
Yeah, it's been extremely illuminating on both sides. Um, I don't know how much more to say about it. Some have never, I mean, most have never thought about combining I mean, at that time, nobody thought of combining two people to the same EEG equipment, and it spurred a concentration in Dr. Barry Sturman's future work. He became a biofeedback therapist based on my work with him at the Sepulveda Veterans Administration Hospital, the neuropsychology lab. He branched out and used my research to create a whole field of his own in therapy, couples therapy.
And I think this was possible, Nina, also because biofeedback research was still in its infancy. So this was new territory for scientists as well. So I think they were more open in the mid 1960s, 1970s to these collaborations with artists. David Rosenbaum also, went to labs and partnered with people who were studying this from a psychological perspective. And they were really interested in testing out new scenarios. And the artists were proposing them. They were coming up with these new concepts. And the what if questions they were raising had a lot more to do with complexity, with just thinking beyond the confines of the lab environment, right? Beyond thinking of the mind in a more reductive way that has to do with, like just one individual responding to a stimulus that kind of reflects back the frequency of the brainwave oscillations of that individual. So they were stepping into new territory, and I think it was intimidating for them too. I know Barry Sturman didn't respond as positively to your work from the very beginning, right, Nina?
Right. I had to promise him I would come up with quantitative information in order to pursue coming back repeatedly and bringing other people and my equipment and mic and his oscilloscope and everything. But he fed it through a PDP-12 computer, and it was seen how one person was influencing the other non-verbally, and how when one person put out theta, the other person put out alpha, the other person put out alpha, and they swung back and forth between each other. And we're constantly putting out different brainwaves at the same time, constantly changing our brainwaves at the same time. But this was like a consistent overall path that he could trace using the computer, and he allowed me to come back.
Yeah, and Anastasia here is saying that scientists at the time, I know she's doing a lot of research as well on the topic of art and biofeedback, primarily in relation to the history of musical experimentation with this. She's saying that scientists were more open than to what we call today param pseudoscience topics, ESP. And yeah, that was indeed the case. And I think it's interesting that Barry Sturman kind of treated you as another scientist, right, in his lab. You being me proof, evidence that this is actually happening across the brains of two people. You can carry on with this experimentation. If not, right, you can no longer use the equipment. And it's amazing that you could keep going, right? You persuaded him.
Yes, I did. And somebody just mentioned Barbara Brown. Barbara Brown is the one who I knew at UCLA because I was teaching there, that recommended that I speak to Barry Sturman about gaining access to EEG equipment.
Yeah, there's a great question from Alan, who just wants to know about the imagery, which has changed over the years as the apparatus has gotten more complex. But also as it gets more complex, have you seen, the participants' reaction change?
Yes, because they have, like, for instance, in the Bronx River Art Center, where the people walk together, they could have their eyes open and see the graphic come together. Whereas the oscilloscope, I had to teach them how to use a reel-to-reel recorder, and then subsequently a 3/4 inch recorder to play back what they had made together. And once it was transposed into digital graphics, there was more room, there was more space, there was more time to observe live the changes in the graphic output. Is that
Yeah, yeah. I just think it's
it?
these videos, the footage is so lovely to watch. You can tell not just that, you come from like a performance art background in like the sense of it being a conceptual piece and all that, but also that you were like always have been a visual artist because just watching the footage itself is stunning. It's amazing to look at. And I love how it evolves over time. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your work with the computer store. So, when I was archiving those videos from the computer store, I was shocked to learn that it's actually called the computer store because it was maybe the first store at which you could buy computers. So it didn't need a clever name to distinguish it. The store in Santa Monica could just be called the computer store. Um, and y- could you just talk about how you got involved with them, but also how involving digital imagery changed your conception of the project?
I noticed I was walking by the store, and I looked in the window, and I said, "Oh my goodness, what is this? This is the computer store." And I walked in and I talked to Dick Heiser, who recently had opened it. He was with the RAND think tank, and he left the RAND think tank to open the computer store. And I immediately thought, well, how to make digital graphic representations of what we had been doing at the neuropsychology lab. And I started working there, you know, putting in memory into people's computers and checking them out, and literally, I mean, I was like at the counter and helping them find books and I was very interested in captivating the the immediacy of the digital transposition from the graphics into from the brainwave information into graphic imagery. Captivated me, and I pursued it, and I love the piece myself because as technology evolves, so does the piece. It can go on and on and on and on until we're completely communicating verbally, the way we do with our pets, the way animals communicate with each other. I mean, yeah.
That's really lovely, Nina. I also love that it started with you just passing by on the sidewalk and looking in the
Yeah.
window. That's
Yeah.
that's
I walked in and
wonderful.
I said, gee, can I work here? After talking to Dick, I introduced myself to Dick, and we had a great conversation. And he said, well, why don't you come work here? The
You've
rest
always
is
been so
history.
resourceful, and I'm always amazed by artists who embrace new media and assumed risks, right? I mean, like it's not like you already knew everything about this technology, right? But you came with a concept and then you thought, okay, what might be the technological tools that might enable me to visualize what I'm thinking about?
You got that one right, among other things.
Christina, maybe we have time for one more question.
A follow-up to what we've observed that Adam was telling us, like how carefully you explained everything to us, right? And you kind of guided us, through this footage, into your work and how it came into being. And you explained, you know, all the components of it. And I know you did this with the participants as well. And I think, you know, you served as this kind of guide, right? And I think that rarely happens nowadays, right? I think very often, even artists who are working with experimental media, right, a lot, they kind of delegate those tasks to others, right? In major museums, when you see works by Terrell, for instance, that involve the use of audio stimuli in response to people's perception and things like that, you know, like, or in Mariko Mori's Wave UFO, you know, you have the people in the lab coats. You're even asked to sign a contract, you know, saying that it's okay, right? You're gonna go through this experience and assume any risks. But that was not the case in the 1970s. And you express that level of care, right? You set the ground for an intimate relationship by being very close to the participants. And I think that's something really unique.
Thank you. I just want to say quickly that Masahiro Kawahara, whom I collaborated with in '92, approached Mariko Mori to do that piece.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's all connected.
I know. I forgot to tell you. That he then went to Mariko Mori, being Japanese and in Japan, and approached her about using his equipment to do that piece.
That's one aspect I had no idea of, but I wrote on that one too.
And that was from based on the '92 installation at Rancher Art Center.
So it's not just your work that grew, you know, it's other work that grew around it, right? There's this organic development of these ideas throughout the art world. They interconnect.
And I just want to say for Alan, you know, most people said, oh, well, let's see if we can make a circle together, even though I said it wasn't anything that you should strive for. And then it changed to, oh, let's see if we can make the people walk together. Let's see if we can make triangles together, you know, etc. So that's how it differed. I just wanted to make sure to answer his question.
Thank you so much, Nina and Christina. This has been a really wonderful event. And Nina, I'm really glad you were able to get back on. Maybe we can close out. You have a very full events calendar coming up. Do you have anything that you'd like to alert people to keep an eye out for?
In February 27th, I'm going to be in a show, Radical Software, Women, Art, and Computing, 1960 to 1991, opening in Vienna at the Kunsthalle there. And I'm going to be doing an improvisational music performance at a club called Vex in Vienna on the 25th of February, 2 days before, and with a sound performance. It's called Sounds of a Circle, where everybody is drawing a circle on their iPhone, which has been covered with a piece of paper, and they're recording the sound of the circle. And then after 1.5 minutes, everybody plays back their sounds of the circle. So it'll be like 40 people, I guess, playing back the sound of the circle. It should be interesting.
That's fantastic.
And it's again the idea of creating something that everyone enjoys together interactively. You know, that's
ripples of connection, sound and image. Yeah,
sound and image.
Shows his background.
Sound and image. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Well, thank you everybody for joining. This was Nina Sobell and Christina Albu. We'll be back next month with Joan Logue and Helena Shashkovich. Yeah, thank you so much. This was great. Thanks so much, Nina. Thanks so much, Christina.
Thank you, Christina. And thank you, Adam. And thank you all of Media Burn, Sarah Chapman and Lila and Tom Weinberg. Fantastic. Wonderful, wonderful people.